Rebecca Taylor stared at the piece of paper in her trembling hands, her eyes fixed on the signature at the bottom, Jackson Wells. The name of one of the wealthiest men in the country was scrawled across the receipt for her rent payment, 3 months' worth that she hadn't been able to afford. She froze, her breath catching in her throat as confusion, relief, and suspicion battled within her. Just yesterday she had been sitting at her kitchen table, head in her hands, wondering how she would tell her 8-year-old daughter Zoe that they might have to leave the only home the little girl had ever known. The eviction notice had been taped to their door for a week now, the bright red final notice stamp, like a recurring nightmare every time Rebecca walked through the entrance of their modest 2-bedroom apartment. The apartment wasn't much. The pipes groaned in winter, the air conditioning barely functioned in summer, and the walls were thin enough that they could hear their neighbor Mr. Peterson's television blaring game shows at all hours. But it was home. It was where Zoe had taken her first steps, where they'd celebrated birthdays with cupcakes and candles, where they'd built pillow forts on rainy days, and where Rebecca had promised they would always be safe. "Mommy, why are you crying?" Zoe had asked, finding Rebecca at the table surrounded by past-due bills and calculator printouts that didn't add up to anything but disaster. Rebecca had quickly wiped her eyes. "Just something in my eye, sweetie. How was school today?" She had been laid off from her administrative position at Westfield Medical Center 3 months ago when the hospital underwent restructuring, which apparently meant cutting staff who had been there less than 2 years. She'd found part-time work at a local coffee shop, but the hours were inconsistent and the pay was barely enough to cover groceries, let alone the rent and utilities, and now, somehow, someone had paid her rent. Not just the current month, but the 2 months she'd fallen behind on as well. And not just anyone, Jackson Wells, the tech billionaire whose face regularly appeared on business magazines and whose name was attached to half the charitable foundations in the city. Rebecca had never met Jackson Wells. She knew of him, of course, everyone did. His company, WellTech Solutions, had revolutionized the healthcare industry with software that made medical records more accessible while maintaining privacy. The company headquarters was located downtown, a gleaming glass tower that Rebecca passed on her bus route to the coffee shop. But why would he pay her rent? How did he even know who she was? She placed the receipt on the counter and picked up the note that had come with it. The handwriting was neat and precise. "Your rent has been taken care of for the next 3 months. No strings attached. Sometimes we all need a helping hand." It was signed simply, "A friend." But the receipt from the property management company clearly showed the payment had come from Jackson Wells's personal account. It had to be a mistake. Or maybe someone in his office had made the payment on behalf of his foundation, and his name was automatically attached to it. That made more sense than a billionaire taking a personal interest in a single mother struggling to make ends meet. Rebecca's phone rang, startling her out of her thoughts. It was Mia, her best friend since college, and the only person who knew just how dire her financial situation had become. "Did you get it?" Mia asked the moment Rebecca answered. "Get what?" "The rent payment. I just got a call from Dave at the management office. He said your rent has been paid through the next quarter and wanted to make sure you knew." Rebecca sank onto a kitchen chair. "Yes, I got the receipt, but Mia, it says it was paid by Jackson Wells, the Jackson Wells." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Wait, the billionaire guy? The one who's always in the news?" "Yes, and I have no idea why he would do this. I don't know him." "I've never met him. Maybe it's some random act of kindness thing, or his foundation is helping people who are struggling. But how would he know about me specifically? It's not like I applied for assistance from his foundation." Mia hesitated. "Well, there might be a connection. Remember when I helped you update your resume last month? We used the template from that workshop I attended at WellTech. They sponsor community programs, and I went to one on job-seeking skills." Rebecca frowned. "You think someone saw my resume and decided to pay my rent? That doesn't make any sense." "I don't know, Beck, but whatever the reason, this is good news, right? You're not getting evicted. You have 3 months to find a better job." Rebecca nodded, even though Mia couldn't see her. "Yes, it's amazing. I don't like owing people, especially someone I don't know." "You don't owe him anything. The note said no strings attached, right?" "I suppose, but no buts." "Take the win, Rebecca. You deserve a break." After hanging up, Rebecca walked to the window overlooking the street below. Evening was setting in, and the streetlights were beginning to glow against the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, Jackson Wells had decided to change her life, and she had no idea why. The next morning, Rebecca woke up with a determination that had been absent for weeks. With the immediate threat of eviction gone, she could focus on finding a full-time job. She dropped Zoe off at school and headed to the public library to use their computers for her job search. As she waited for the bus, her gaze drifted to the gleaming Welltech building in the distance. On impulse, she decided to get off at that stop instead. She wouldn't try to see Jackson Wells. That would be ridiculous, but maybe she could learn something about his charitable foundation that would explain why she had been selected for help. The lobby of Welltech Solutions was intimidating. All marble floors, modern art, and sleek furniture. Rebecca approached the reception desk, suddenly aware of her worn jeans and simple blouse. "Can I help you?" asked the receptionist, a polished young woman with perfectly styled hair. "I was wondering if you have any information about the Wells Foundation, their community programs." The receptionist smiled professionally. "Of course. There's a display about the foundation's work on the mezzanine level. Take the elevator to M and you'll see it as soon as you exit." "Thank you," Rebecca said, relieved it had been that easy. As she turned toward the elevators, a tall man in an expensive suit bumped into her, causing her to drop her purse. Its contents scattered across the polished floor. "I'm so sorry," the man said, immediately crouching down to help her gather her things. Rebecca knelt to collect her belongings, mortified as her old wallet, loose change, and the crumpled rent receipt tumbled out. The man picked up the receipt, and as he handed it back to her, his eyes widened almost imperceptibly. Their eyes met, and Rebecca felt a jolt of recognition. The strong jawline, the intense blue eyes, the slight crease between his brows. She had seen this face on magazine covers and news websites. Jackson Wells was helping her pick up her scattered possessions, and he was staring at his own signature on her rent receipt. For a moment, neither of them moved. Rebecca felt heat rush to her face as Jackson Wells continued to stare at the receipt in his hand. She quickly snatched it back and stuffed it into her purse. "I'm sorry for the collision," he said smoothly, his voice deeper than she'd expected. His eyes, a striking blue that seemed almost too intense to be real, studied her face with curiosity. "Were you here to see me?" Rebecca shook her head quickly, embarrassment making her voice catch. "No, I didn't even know you would be here. I was just coming to learn about the Foundation's programs." He raised an eyebrow, and she realized how suspicious that must sound after he'd just seen his own name on her rent receipt. "I received an anonymous donation," she blurted out, then immediately regretted it. "Well, it was supposed to be anonymous, but your name was on the receipt, and I was curious why. I don't understand why you would—" "Perhaps we should talk somewhere more private," Jackson suggested, glancing around the busy lobby where several people were casting curious glances their way. "Would you join me for coffee?" Rebecca hesitated. This wasn't why she had come. She'd only wanted information, not a direct confrontation with the man himself. But now that he was standing in front of her, how could she refuse? "I have about an hour before I need to be at work," she said finally. Jackson nodded and guided her not to the elevators, but toward a discreet door at the side of the lobby. It opened into a small, elegant cafe that Rebecca hadn't noticed from outside. Unlike the corporate sterility of the lobby, the cafe was warm and inviting, with soft lighting and comfortable seating. "This is my private entrance," he explained as they settled at a corner table. "Allows me to avoid the paparazzi on difficult days." A barista approached immediately. "The usual, Mr. Wells?" "Yes, thank you, Marcus. And for the lady?" Rebecca ordered a simple latte, fighting the urge to choose the cheapest item on the menu. When the barista left, an awkward silence fell between them. "So," Jackson said finally, "you found out I paid your rent?" Rebecca met his gaze directly. "Yes, and I'd like to know why." He seemed taken aback by her directness. "Most people would just say thank you." "I am grateful," she said quickly, "incredibly grateful. You have no idea what it means to me and my daughter. But I don't understand why you would help me specifically. I'm nobody to you." Jackson's expression softened. "You're not nobody, Rebecca. You're someone who needed help, and I was in a position to provide it." The use of her name startled her. "How do you know my name?" He hesitated, seeming to choose his words carefully. "Your friend Mia attended one of our community workshops last month. She was quite vocal about her friend, who had been unfairly laid off from Westfield Medical Center, despite being an exceptional employee." Rebecca's eyes widened. Mia talked about me at your workshop. Jackson nodded. She mentioned you were a single mother struggling after the layoff. She didn't ask for help directly, but she made quite an impression on my community outreach director, who passed along your story during our weekly foundation meeting. Their drinks arrived, and Rebecca took a moment to process this information. Mia had never mentioned speaking about her at the workshop. We have a program that assists healthcare workers who have been displaced due to corporate restructuring, Jackson continued. Given that my company works primarily with healthcare systems, we feel a certain responsibility when these institutions make cuts that affect dedicated employees. Rebecca wrapped her hands around the warm mug. So this was just part of your foundation's regular work, not a personal decision? Something flickered in Jackson's eyes. The foundation identified you as a candidate, yes, but I made the decision to handle your case personally. Why? Jackson took a sip of his coffee before answering. Your situation resonated with me. My mother was a single parent too. She worked at a hospital as a nurse's aide when I was growing up. We struggled after my father left, and there were many times when we nearly lost our apartment. His expression grew distant. No one helped us then. But I promised myself that if I ever had the means, I would help others in similar situations. Rebecca felt a knot in her throat. I'm sorry about your mother. Is she... She passed away 10 years ago, Jackson said quietly. Before I made my first million. She never saw any of this. He gestured vaguely at their surroundings. Rebecca nodded, understanding the regret behind his words. I think she'd be proud of what you're doing with your success. A small smile touched his lips. I hope so. For the first time, Rebecca saw beyond the billionaire facade to the person underneath, someone who had known struggle, who understood what it meant to fear losing your home, your security. Thank you, she said sincerely. Not just for the rent, but for telling me why. It means a lot to know there was a reason, that it wasn't just random charity. You're welcome, he replied. And the offer stands. 3 months of rent, no strings attached. Use that time to find something better than the coffee shop. From what Mia said, you have considerable skills that are being wasted there. Rebecca tensed slightly. I don't need career advice. I'm doing what I need to do to support my daughter. Of course, Jackson said, looking slightly chagrined. I didn't mean to overstep. Rebecca sighed. No, I'm sorry. That was defensive. It's just been a difficult few months, and I'm not used to accepting help. I understand that too, he said, checking his watch. I should let you get to work, but Rebecca... He paused, seeming uncertain for the first time. Would you and your daughter join me for dinner this weekend? I'd like to introduce you to someone who might be able to help with your job search. No pressure, just networking. Rebecca was stunned by the invitation. Dinner with Jackson Wells? The idea was absurd. Yet there was something genuine in his offer that made her hesitate to refuse outright. I don't know, she said honestly. That seems like it crosses the line from charitable donation to something else. Fair enough, he acknowledged. Then think of it as me repaying you. Repaying me for what? For reminding me why I started the foundation in the first place. It's easy to get lost in board meetings and funding allocations. Meeting someone who's actually benefited from the work, it's valuable to me. Rebecca couldn't help but smile at his persistence. I'll think about it. Excellent. He produced a business card and wrote a number on the back. This is my personal cell. Text me if you decide to accept. Saturday at 7. As they parted ways outside the cafe, Rebecca felt oddly disoriented. The morning had taken a turn she could never have anticipated. She had walked into Welltech Solutions hoping for information and had walked out with a direct line to one of the most powerful men in the city. On her bus ride to the coffee shop, she texted Mia, "You never told me you talked about me at that Welltech workshop." Mia's response came quickly. What? I mentioned you to a few people, but nothing major. Why? Because I just had coffee with Jackson Wells, and he said that's how he heard about my situation. There was a long pause before Mia's next message. You had coffee with Jackson Wells, the billionaire? It's a long story. Call you after work. Rebecca put her phone away, her mind racing. There was something about the whole situation that didn't quite add up. Jackson's explanation made sense on the surface, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than he was sharing. As she tied on her apron at the coffee shop, she wondered if she would actually text him about dinner. Part of her was curious to learn more, to understand why a billionaire would take such personal interest in her situation. Another part warned that nothing good could come from getting involved with someone from such a different world. What she didn't realize was that her decision would uncover secrets that would change everything she thought she knew about her past and her future. "You have to go," Mia insisted on Friday night, sprawled across Rebecca's couch while Zoe played in her room. "How often does a single mom from our neighborhood get invited to dinner with one of the richest men in the country?" Rebecca folded laundry with quick, nervous movements. "That's exactly why I shouldn't go. We're from completely different worlds. What would we even talk about?" "You managed to talk over coffee, didn't you?" Mia pointed out. "Besides, he said he wants to introduce you to someone who could help with your job search. That alone is worth putting on a nice dress and making small talk for a few hours." Rebecca sighed, placing a stack of Zoe's t-shirts on the coffee table. "I don't know, Mia. Something about this feels strange. Why would he take such a personal interest in my situation? The foundation explanation makes sense, but dinner at his home. Maybe he likes you," Mia suggested with a sly smile. "Don't be ridiculous," Rebecca scoffed, though a flush crept up her neck. Jackson Wells was undeniably attractive, with his intense blue eyes and the quiet confidence he carried. But men like him didn't date women like her, single mothers working part-time in coffee shops. "Even if that were true, I'm not looking for a relationship, especially not with someone so—" She waved her hand, searching for the right word. "Rich? Handsome? Successful?" Mia offered helpfully. "Complicated," Rebecca finished. "My life is already complicated enough." "All the more reason to have dinner with someone who might simplify things by helping you find a decent job," Mia reasoned. She sat up and fixed Rebecca with a serious look. "What's the real reason you're hesitating? Because it's not about the career connection." Rebecca stopped folding and sank onto the couch beside her friend. "I don't want to owe anyone anything. My entire adult life has been about being independent, about showing Zoe that we can make it on our own." She twisted a dishcloth between her fingers. Taking the rent money was hard enough, but it was anonymous. At least it was supposed to be. Going to dinner, accepting more help. It changes things. Mia placed a hand over Rebecca's. "Being independent doesn't mean refusing help when you need it. It means making the best choices for you and Zoe. If this dinner could lead to a better job, isn't that the right choice?" Before Rebecca could respond, Zoe bounded into the living room, clutching a drawing. "Mommy, look what I made. It's you and me and our house." Rebecca examined the colorful crayon creation. A smiling stick figure woman holding hands with a smaller stick figure girl, standing beside a lopsided rectangle with a triangular roof. "It's beautiful, sweetie. I love it." "Can we put it on the fridge?" Zoe asked, her brown eyes so like her father's, wide with hope. "Absolutely," Rebecca answered, getting up to place the drawing under a magnet on the refrigerator door. As she did, she caught sight of the calendar hanging beside it. 3 months. That's all the time she had before the rent would come due again. Later that night, after Mia had gone home and Zoe was tucked in bed, Rebecca pulled out Jackson's business card. She ran her finger over the embossed logo, considering her options. Perhaps Mia was right. Perhaps accepting help didn't mean surrendering her independence. Before she could change her mind, she sent a text. "This is Rebecca Taylor. If the dinner invitation is still open, Zoe and I would be happy to accept." His response came almost immediately. "Excellent. I'll send a car for you tomorrow at 6:30. A car. Of course, a billionaire wouldn't expect her to take the bus to his home. The thought made her stomach tighten with nerves. Saturday evening arrived, and Rebecca stood before her closet, Zoe bouncing excitedly on the bed behind her. "Are we really going to a mansion, Mommy?" she asked for the 3rd time. "I don't know if it's a mansion, but Mr. Wells has a very nice home, I'm sure," Rebecca replied, finally selecting a simple navy blue dress, the one she reserved for job interviews. It wasn't fancy, but it was the best she had. "Is Mr. Wells your boyfriend?" Zoe asked innocently. Rebecca nearly dropped the dress. "No, sweetie, he's just a friend who's helping us out. Like Aunt Mia helps us. Sort of, yes." Rebecca began to change, wondering how to explain their situation to an 8-year-old. "Mr. Wells has a lot of money, and he uses some of it to help people who need it. Right now, we need a little help, so he's helping us." Zoe considered this as she watched her mother apply a touch of makeup. "That's nice of him." "Yes, it is," Rebecca agreed, brushing Zoe's dark curls. "And that's why we're going to be on our best behavior tonight, okay?" "I promise," Zoe declared solemnly. At precisely 6:30, a sleek black car pulled up outside their apartment building. The driver, a courteous older man named Thomas, held the door open for them with a warm smile. "Miss Taylor and Miss Zoe, I presume. Mr. Wells is looking forward to your company this evening." The drive took them out of the city, through increasingly affluent neighborhoods, until they turned onto a private road that wound through carefully landscaped grounds. Rebecca's nervousness grew with each passing minute, and she clutched Zoe's hand tightly as the car approached an impressive stone house perched on a hillside, offering what must be a spectacular view of the city below. "Wow," Zoe whispered, eyes wide. "It is a mansion." Thomas escorted them to the front door, which opened before they could knock. Jackson Wells stood in the entryway, dressed more casually than Rebecca had seen him before, dark slacks and a blue button-down shirt that matched his eyes. "Rebecca, welcome," he said warmly, before crouching down to Zoe's level. "And you must be Zoe. I've heard you're quite the artist." Zoe beamed, shyness forgotten. "How did you know that?" "Your mother mentioned it," Jackson lied smoothly, winking at Rebecca over Zoe's head. "I have a surprise for you. While your mother and I talk with our guest, my housekeeper, Mrs. Clark, has set up an art station for you in the sunroom. Would you like to see it?" Zoe nodded enthusiastically, and Jackson led them through the house, a tasteful blend of modern luxury and comfortable warmth, to a bright room overlooking a garden. A table had been prepared with high-quality art supplies that made Zoe gasp with delight. "This is amazing," she exclaimed, immediately gravitating toward the colorful markers and papers. Mrs. Clark, a kindly woman in her 60s, introduced herself and promised to keep an eye on Zoe while the adults talked. Rebecca hesitated, reluctant to leave her daughter with a stranger. "It's okay, Mummy," Zoe assured her, already selecting a marker. "I'll make you a special picture." Reassured by Zoe's comfort and Mrs. Clark's grandmotherly demeanor, Rebecca allowed Jackson to guide her to another room where a woman was waiting. "Rebecca, I'd like you to meet Patricia Holloway, the Chief Human Resources Officer at Meridian Health Systems." Rebecca shook hands with Patricia, a sharply dressed woman in her 50s, with intelligent eyes and a firm handshake. "Pleasure to meet you, Rebecca," Patricia said. "Jackson has told me about your situation at Westfield. Their loss might be our gain." Over dinner, a delicious meal served in a dining room that managed to feel intimate despite its size, Patricia explained that Meridian was expanding its administrative team and looking for someone with healthcare experience. "We're implementing a new patient management system next quarter," Patricia explained. "Your experience with similar systems at Westfield would be valuable during the transition." Rebecca listened, hardly daring to hope. "That sounds perfect, actually. I helped train staff on the new system before I was laid off." "That's exactly the kind of experience we need," Patricia confirmed. "I'd like you to come in for a formal interview on Monday, but between us, I think you'd be an excellent fit." As they discussed the details, Rebecca couldn't help glancing at Jackson, who sat quietly, a satisfied smile playing at his lips. He had orchestrated this entire evening. The invitation, the meeting with Patricia, even the art supplies for Zoe. The extent of his thoughtfulness was almost overwhelming. After dinner, Patricia excused herself, leaving Rebecca alone with Jackson, while Zoe continued drawing in the sunroom. "Thank you," Rebecca said simply, emotion making her voice unsteady. "I don't know how to repay you for all this." "You don't need to repay me," Jackson assured her. "Seeing you get the opportunity you deserve is enough." They moved to a comfortable sitting room, where Jackson poured them each a glass of wine. As they settled onto opposite ends of a sofa, Rebecca studied him curiously. "Can I ask you something personal?" He looked surprised but nodded. "Of course. Why are you really doing all this, the rent, the job connection? It seems like a lot of effort for someone you didn't even know a week ago." Jackson swirled the wine in his glass, his expression becoming guarded. "I told you, your situation reminded me of my mother's." "I believe that's part of it," Rebecca acknowledged, "but I can't shake the feeling there's something more." Jackson was silent for a long moment, then set his glass down and reached for his phone. He scrolled through it briefly before holding it out to her. On the screen was a photograph of a woman with dark hair and a familiar smile. "This is my mother," he said quietly. Her name was Catherine Wells. Rebecca looked at the photo, then back at Jackson with confusion. "Okay, Before she married my father, her name was Catherine Taylor. Rebecca's heart skipped a beat. Taylor, her last name. What are you saying? She whispered, though a terrible suspicion was already forming in her mind. Jackson took a deep breath. Rebecca, I think there's a possibility that we're related. My mother had a brother, Thomas Taylor. They became estranged before I was born. I never met him, and my mother rarely spoke of him. But when Mia mentioned your name at the workshop, I became curious. I did some research. Rebecca felt the room spinning. My father's name was Thomas Taylor. I know, Jackson said gently. He passed away 6 years ago. Heart attack. How do you know that? Rebecca demanded, setting her wine glass down with a shaking hand. Like I said, I did some research. Birth certificates, death records. He hesitated. Rebecca, I believe you're my cousin. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. Jackson Wells, the billionaire who had mysteriously paid her rent, wasn't just a generous stranger, he was family. Family she hadn't known existed. Why didn't you tell me this when we met? She asked, her voice barely audible. I wasn't certain at first, he admitted, and I didn't want to approach you with a family connection I couldn't prove. It seemed better to help you through the foundation while I confirmed my suspicions. Rebecca stood abruptly, needing space to process this bombshell. I need to check on Zoe. Of course, Jackson said, concern evident in his expression. Take all the time you need. As Rebecca walked toward the sunroom, her mind raced with questions. If what Jackson said was true, her father had never once mentioned having a sister whose son had become one of the wealthiest men in the country. Why would he keep that a secret? What had caused such a deep estrangement that her father would erase his sister from their family history entirely? And what did this revelation mean for her and Zoe's future? Rebecca paused in the hallway, taking deep breaths to calm her racing heart. Through the doorway, she could see Zoe happily absorbed in her artwork, completely unaware that her world was shifting on its axis. For a moment, Rebecca envied her daughter's innocence. Family. Jackson Wells was claiming to be family. The thought was so overwhelming that Rebecca leaned against the wall for support. Her father had never mentioned a sister, not once in all the years she had known him. After her mother died when Rebecca was 12, it had just been the two of them until she turned 18 and moved out to attend college. Even after they'd grown apart, he had never revealed this secret. When she had composed herself enough, Rebecca returned to the sitting room where Jackson waited, tension evident in his posture. I'm sorry to spring this on you, he said immediately. I should have found a better way to tell you. Rebecca sank back onto the sofa. How can you be sure? About us being related, I mean. Jackson reached for a folder on the side table and opened it. I hired a private investigator to look into the connection once I suspected it. Here's what I found. He handed her several documents, a birth certificate for Catherine Taylor, born 2 years before her father, a marriage certificate showing Catherine Taylor had married William Wells in 1980, family photographs showing a young woman who bore a striking resemblance to Rebecca's grandmother, standing beside a boy who must have been her father. This is my dad, Rebecca whispered, touching the photo gently. He looks so young here. That was taken shortly before the estrangement, according to the dates on the back, Jackson explained. My mother was 22, which would make your father around 20. Rebecca studied the image, noting the easy smiles, the way Catherine had her arm draped affectionately over her brother's shoulders. Whatever had come between them hadn't happened yet when this picture was taken. Do you know why they stopped speaking to each other? She asked. Jackson shook his head. My mother would never discuss it. The few times I asked about her family, she would say only that some bridges couldn't be rebuilt once they were burned. I always sensed it was too painful for her to talk about. Rebecca frowned, trying to reconcile this new information with the father she had known. Quiet, hard-working, emotionally distant after her mother's death. My dad never mentioned having a sister, not even once. The investigator found something else, Jackson said hesitantly. A court case from 1985. Your father sued my parents over some family property, a small house that had belonged to your grandparents. My parents won the case. A lawsuit over property, Rebecca repeated. That doesn't sound like my father. He was never materialistic. People change, Jackson said gently, especially when they feel wronged. The thought of her father being consumed by bitterness was difficult to accept, but it would explain his silence about his sister. Losing both the relationship and the lawsuit might have been too humiliating to acknowledge, especially to his daughter. After I found all this, Jackson continued, I wanted to meet you, to see if you knew anything about the estrangement, but I was afraid a direct approach might seem too intrusive. When I heard about your financial difficulties through Mia's comments at the workshop, it seemed like the perfect opportunity to help you while I figured out how to tell you the truth. Rebecca looked up sharply. So the rent payment, the job connection, was that all just a way to get close enough to ask about my father? Jackson's expression fell. No, not at all. I genuinely wanted to help you. The family connection made it more personal, but I would have helped anyway. My mother's struggle as a single parent shaped my entire approach to philanthropy. Rebecca wasn't sure she believed him. The timing was too convenient, the coincidence too perfect. And what now? You've told me we're cousins. What do you expect to happen? I don't have expectations, Jackson replied carefully, but I have hopes. I hope we might get to know each other. I hope Zoe might have family beyond just you. I hope we might heal whatever breach happened between our parents, even if we never fully understand it. His sincerity was difficult to doubt, and Rebecca felt her skepticism softening. She had always wished for extended family, especially after her father's death had left her and Zoe truly alone. The idea that they might have a cousin, even one as unexpected as a tech billionaire, was both unsettling and oddly comforting. I need time to process this, she said finally. It's a lot to take in. Of course, Jackson agreed immediately. Take all the time you need. The job opportunity with Patricia is genuine, regardless of what you decide about our potential relationship. Rebecca nodded gratefully. Thank you for that. And for telling me the truth, even if your timing could have been better. A tentative smile touched Jackson's lips. Timing has never been my strong suit. Just ask my board of directors. The small joke broke some of the tension, and Rebecca found herself smiling back. Before she could respond, Zoe bounded into the room, holding a large piece of paper. Mommy, Mr. Wells, look what I made, she exclaimed, proudly displaying her artwork. It showed 3 stick figures, a tall woman with curly hair, a small girl and a tall man, all holding hands in front of what appeared to be Jackson's house. Above them, in rainbow letters, she had written, New Friends. Rebecca's heart constricted at the innocent drawing. Zoe had no idea how complicated the situation had become, or that the man she'd just met might actually be family. Jackson knelt down to examine the drawing. This is wonderful, Zoe. You're very talented. Would it be all right if I kept this? I'd like to hang it in my office. Zoe beamed with pride. Really? In your big office in the tall building? Absolutely, Jackson affirmed. Everyone who visits me will see what an amazing artist you are. As Zoe chatted excitedly with Jackson about her drawing, Rebecca watched them interact. There was an ease between them that she hadn't expected, a natural rapport that made her wonder if some familial connection could be sensed even without knowledge of it. The evening eventually came to an end, with Jackson promising to have Thomas drive them home whenever they were ready. As Zoe gathered her art supplies, Rebecca pulled Jackson aside. I'd like to see those documents again, if that's okay. And maybe we could meet next week to talk more. Relief washed over Jackson's face. I'd like that very much. I'll have copies made of everything for you to keep. On the drive home, Zoe fell asleep against Rebecca's arm, exhausted from the excitement. Rebecca gazed out the window at the city lights, her mind still reeling from the evening's revelations. She had gone to dinner expecting a job connection and had come away with a family connection she never knew existed. The interview with Patricia on Monday went exceptionally well. By Wednesday, Rebecca had a formal job offer from Meridian Health Systems, a position that paid nearly twice what she had made at Westfield, with better benefits and more flexible hours for raising Zoe. It was a life-changing opportunity, and she accepted immediately. That weekend, Jackson came to their apartment for lunch. It was his first time visiting their modest home, and Rebecca had worried he would find it shabby or uncomfortable. Instead, he seemed genuinely at ease, sitting on their worn sofa and admiring Zoe's artwork that covered the refrigerator. Over sandwiches and lemonade, Rebecca shared stories about her father, the good memories from her childhood, his dedication to her education, his quiet pride in her accomplishments. Jackson, in turn, told her about Catherine, her passion for gardening, her volunteer work at local hospitals, her infectious laugh that could fill a room. She would have loved to meet you, he said wistfully, and she would have adored Zoe. I wish I had known her, Rebecca admitted. It's strange to think she was out there all my life, and I never knew. After Zoe went to play with a neighbor, Rebecca finally asked the question that had been bothering her since dinner at Jackson's home. Why did you never try to find my father while your mother was alive, or after she passed? Jackson sighed, looking down at his hands. I did, actually. After my mother died, I hired investigators to locate Thomas Taylor. They found him, living alone in a small apartment across town. I drove there one day, sat in my car outside his building for almost an hour, trying to work up the courage to knock on his door. But you didn't, Rebecca guessed. No, Jackson admitted. I was afraid he would reject me, afraid I would learn something terrible about my mother, afraid the estrangement was for good reason. So I drove away, promising myself I'd try again another day. His expression darkened with regret, and then, a year later, I read his obituary in the paper. I'd waited too long. Rebecca reached across the table and took his hand. You couldn't have known. And for what it's worth, I think he would have been glad to meet you, especially toward the end. He softened a lot in his final years. They continued meeting regularly over the following months. Rebecca started her new job at Meridian. Zoe thrived with the stability that came from their improved circumstances, and Jackson became a fixture in their lives, joining them for dinner, attending Zoe's school performances, teaching her to play chess on Sunday afternoons. 6 months after their first unexpected meeting in the Welltech lobby, Rebecca invited Jackson to join them for a special dinner at their apartment. I have something to show you, she said, after they had eaten. She retrieved a dusty box from her bedroom closet and placed it on the coffee table. After our first few conversations, I remembered my father kept some old family photos in storage. I found these last weekend. She opened the box and carefully removed a faded photograph. It showed her father as a young man, arm in arm with his sister Catherine, both laughing at something off camera. I'd never paid much attention to these before, Rebecca explained, handing him the photo. But now I recognize her from the pictures you showed me. This is definitely your mother. Jackson took the photograph with reverent hands. I've never seen this one before, he said, voice thick with emotion. She looks so happy. Rebecca pulled out another item, a yellowed envelope addressed to Thomas Taylor in elegant handwriting. I found this too. It's unopened. Jackson stared at the envelope. That's my mother's handwriting. I know, Rebecca said softly. The postmark is from 1992, 7 years after the lawsuit. I think she tried to reach out to him, but he never opened it. Do you want to read it? Jackson asked hesitantly. Rebecca nodded, carefully opening the sealed envelope and unfolding the letter inside. As she read the faded words aloud, the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place. Dear Thomas, it has been too long since we spoke. Not a day passes that I don't regret our estrangement. The house was never worth losing you, and I should have found a way to compromise. Pride is a terrible thing when it costs us the people we love. William and I are doing well. Our son, Jackson, is 12 now, and reminds me of you in so many ways. I've enclosed a recent photo. I hope someday you might meet him. I heard through old friends that you married Eleanor and have a daughter. I'm happy for you, truly. Family is precious, something I understand better now than I did when we fought. If you're willing, I would very much like to try again. We can't erase the past, but perhaps we can build a new future. My number is enclosed if you wish to reach me. With love, always. Catherine. Rebecca wiped tears from her eyes as she finished reading. He never opened it. He never knew she wanted to reconcile. And my mother never knew if he'd received it or simply rejected her attempt, Jackson added, his own eyes glistening. What a waste of time they could have had together. Zoe, who had been quietly listening, approached them both. But you found each other, she said simply. Isn't that what matters now? Rebecca pulled her daughter into a hug, amazed by her wisdom. Yes, sweetheart, that's exactly what matters now. As the evening drew to a close, Rebecca walked Jackson to the door. I'm glad you paid my rent, she said with a smile, even if your methods were a bit unorthodox. Best money I ever spent, he replied warmly. It brought me the family I never knew I had. 3 years later, Rebecca sat on the porch of a beautiful Cape Cod home, watching as Zoe and Jackson played an elaborate game of tag across the lawn. The beach house had been purchased jointly, a place where they could gather for holidays and summer vacations, building the family traditions their parents had never been able to share. Rebecca had excelled at Meridian, earning a promotion to department director within 2 years. Her financial struggles were a distant memory now, though she remained grounded, never taking her good fortune for granted. As she sipped her coffee, she thought about the unopened letter that had waited decades to deliver its message of reconciliation. Her father and Catherine had lost their chance to heal old wounds, but their children had found each other anyway. Sometimes, Rebecca reflected, the universe had its own timeline for bringing people together. Jackson jogged up the porch steps, laughing and out of breath from chasing Zoe. "Your daughter is relentless," he complained good-naturedly, collapsing into the chair beside her. "She gets that from both sides of the family, apparently," Rebecca teased, looking out at the ocean beyond their property, at Zoe building a sandcastle where the lawn met the beach, at the man who had gone from mysterious benefactor to beloved cousin. Rebecca felt a profound sense of gratitude. A single act of generosity, a rent payment from an unknown source, had unraveled secrets, healed old wounds, and created a new definition of family for all of them. When Zoe waved for them to join her at the shoreline, Rebecca and Jackson walked down together, ready to help build something new on the foundation of what had once been lost.